distinguidos delegados.
Distinguished delegates, we are now calling to order the afternoon meeting, and we will now continue with our speakers list. I, with that, wish to give the floor first and foremost to Her Excellency Penny Wong, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Australia.
Tiene usted la palabra.
You have the floor, madam.
Thank you very much, Excellencies and distinguished delegates. Can I thank the co-presidents from Norway and Panama for their leadership. I acknowledge Dr. Robert Floyd, Executive Secretary of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organisation, CTBTO, and thank him for his and his staff's tireless efforts in pursuing the universalisation of the CTBT. Friends, earlier this week, nations gathered to discuss a treaty to ban the production of fissile material for nuclear weapons, a missing pillar in our non-proliferation architecture. And today we are here in support of one of the strongest pillars of our disarmament and non-proliferation architecture, the global norm prohibiting nuclear weapons testing. And we're here because we all understand the grave threat posed to all of us by nuclear weapons. We know the catastrophic impacts of testing these weapons, and that is well known to our region. Impacts which linger in the Pacific, in Australia and elsewhere around the world, and this terrible history should never be repeated anywhere. That is why we are so united in our determination to strengthen this norm. Within the Pacific, the CTBT is approaching universalisation, and we congratulate Solomon Islands on its ratification earlier this year and Tuvalu last year. This is a big milestone, a milestone which will send a strong message for others to follow. Australia is working to strengthen the CTBT through practical measures in our region, including through technical assistance for Pacific Islands Forum members. We're supporting Forum members' efforts to access the civil and environmental benefits of the international monetary system. But pleasingly, momentum is also building beyond the Pacific. Since I had the privilege of co-chairing with Japan the CTBT Group of Friends ministerial meeting this time last year, further ratifications have followed from Sri Lanka, Equatorial Guinea, São Tomé and Príncipe. Earlier this month, Somalia signed the CTBT. Australia welcomes these ratifications, and we look forward to more. The value of the CTBT in achieving and maintaining a world free of nuclear weapons is clear. Prior to the signature of the treaty, the world had seen more than 2,000 nuclear tests. This century, only one state has tested a weapon, the DPRK. The CTBT also delivers on a daily basis through monitoring stations around the globe which can detect nuclear explosive tests anywhere at any time. My country, Australia, is proud to host 21 stations, the world's third largest number of stations. Excellencies, far from being utopian, the objective of nuclear disarmament is both practical and it is necessary. So we strongly support the important declaration adopted here today, and Australia is redoubling our efforts towards the goal of a world without nuclear weapons, a world in which the danger and suffering caused by testing is never repeated and is relegated to history, and we ask all nations to join us. I thank you. Gracias.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Australia, Her Excellency Penny Wong, for the address delivered. I now invite Mr. Frederic Mondoloni, Director General for Political and Security Affairs at the French Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs, to take the floor.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor for me to speak before you today with regard to this very important topic for France, that is the promotion of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Ladies and gentlemen, 25 years ago exactly, France, together with the UK, completed the process of ratification of the CTBT, which it had signed in 1996. This ratification, completed in a very rapid time frame, demonstrated the unwavering commitment of my country to the CTBT as a responsible nuclear weapon state and also as an Annex 2 state. And as you know, ratification of those states is required for the entry into force of the treaty. Sadly, 27 years after the opening of the CTBT for signature, this has still not entered into force. But this has not deprived the treaty of its objective effectiveness. To this day, 186 states have signed the CTBT, 178 have ratified it, and the Provisional Technical Secretariat is already fully functional. Completing and maintaining the international monitoring system, which is the real key cornerstone of the ratification regime, remains a priority. At a time when there are increasing natural disasters, the CTBTO monitoring system is contributing significantly and in an outstanding manner to studying and combating the effects of climate change, especially through the tsunami alert system, which France fully supports. Ladies and gentlemen, France has implemented its commitments in a sincere way. We have ratified the CTBT and done so through strong and tangible acts. In 1998, France dismantled definitively and transparently its nuclear testing facility in French Polynesia in partnership with the IAEA and the CTBTO. And today it must be said that our country is unique in those efforts. I again encourage everyone to try to see what that facility is, but there's nothing more to be seen because everything has been removed irreversibly. We have also significantly reduced our nuclear arsenal and definitively ended our production of plutonium and uranium for military purposes. Launching negotiations on a fissile material cutoff treaty, which is an indispensable complement to the CTBT, is a priority spearheaded by France and its partners in the P5. France also is contributing greatly to the international monitoring system. We have 16 stations on our territory, 8 stations abroad, and a radionuclear laboratory certified by the CTBTO and operated by France. France is carrying out all of its commitments under the treaty, and it continues to develop technology for the IMS, as well as software tools to process the relevant data, which it provides free of charge to all signatory states. And lastly, we welcome the holding in 2025 in Sri Lanka of an integrated field exercise. The ability to conduct inspections on site once the CTBT has entered into force is a key element of the verification regime. And we continue to support the Provisional Technical Secretariat for these efforts. Ladies and gentlemen, much has been done, and yet we should not settle for an incomplete success. As you know, since 1996, 3 countries have carried out new nuclear tests. North Korea violated that almost universally accepted rule. All nuclear weapon states under the NPT have signed the CTBT, but only 3 have ratified it. And today, 8 states, Annex 2 states, are still missing. Without these states, the CTBT cannot enter into force. And this requirement is the strength of our treaty. The mandate of this Article 14 conference is clear: facilitate the entry into force of the treaty. And that's why we co-sponsor Resolution 2310, which urges all states that have not yet done so to sign and ratify the CTBT. And this is an appeal For the international community and the Security Council, it must be heeded and implemented. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, France calls upon all states to join the treaty to protect and universalize the CTBT. We believe that the conference that's being held today is an important element here, and we fully support it. In general and in particular, this year, given the tensions that we have observed, this makes the ratification of this instrument even more important. We call on all states that have, whether they have signed or ratified the treaty or not, to reaffirm and to maintain moratoriums on nuclear testing. Ladies and gentlemen, our international community must take stock of this challenge and make every effort to ensure the treaty enters into force. And here we welcome the holding today of this conference. Thank you.
I wish to thank the distinguished Mr. Frederic Mondoloni, Director General for Political and Security Affairs at the French Ministry for European and Foreign Affairs. I now give the floor to Mr. Guillermo Ardizone Garcia, Political Director of the Department of Foreign Affairs in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the European Union and Cooperation of Spain. You have the floor. Co-Presidents, Executive Secretary, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Spain wishes to express its sincere thanks to the Secretary General of the United Nations for his commitment, as well as that shown by Norway and Panama as coordinators of the Article 14 process. Thank you for convening and organising this conference. I wish to extend my thanks to Italy and South Africa for their laudable work as the previous coordinators of the Article 14 process to facilitate the entry into force of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. Spain, moreover, applauds those countries that have ratified this treaty in recent years. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in an uncertain context exacerbated by the illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russia, it's more important than ever before to strengthen the body of international instruments that we have that pursue the goal of disarmament and non-proliferation, particularly on the nuclear front. The entry into force of the treaty would make a significant contribution to moving towards a world free of nuclear weapons. Today, as participants in this conference, we renew our steadfast political commitment at the highest level to that entry into force and to pursuing the goal of putting an end to nuclear tests. The treaty is very close to being universal, and that fact has contributed to meaning that now nuclear tests are rightly perceived as reprehensible acts and are subject to international sanctions. A moratorium on nuclear tests has developed itself as a de facto international norm respected by all since the beginning of this century, with the reprehensible exception of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. We must remain united in our appeal for this moratorium to continue to be respected. However, it is of pivotal importance that the treaty enter into force. Our primary appeal, therefore, is here issued to those states that have not yet ratified the treaty, in particular to Annex II states. They must facilitate the fulfillment of this moral, political and strategic imperative. It should be underscored here that thanks to our common commitment, we have achieved the launch of the international monitoring system. That system contributes to the maintenance of international peace and security as it guarantees the early detection of nuclear explosions, and it helps us to achieve the SDGs through its civilian and scientific applications. We must ensure that the resources it requires to become a comprehensive system are allocated, resources must also be allocated to guarantee the maintenance of the system so that the PrEPCom can undertake the verification responsibilities contained within its mandate. Spain, as a member state of the European Union and active participant in the Stockholm Initiative for Nuclear Disarmament, will continue advocating for the entry into force of the treaty and its universalization. We are championing the respect of the international moratorium on tests and support the PrEPCom and its executive secretary. Thank you.
Doy las gracias.
I wish to thank the distinguished Guillermo Ardizone Garcia, Political Director of the Department of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, European Union and Cooperation of Spain. I'm now delighted to invite Mr. Paulo Tetamanti, Secretary of Foreign Affairs of Argentina, to take the floor. A good afternoon to you, co-presidents. We thank Norway and Panama as coordinators of this important work. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to extend particular thanks to the Executive Secretary for his visit to Argentina on the 5th of September to Argentina. A little bit after our foreign minister visited the monitoring system in Vienna. Those visits are the reflection of a reality, and that is that our state has fulfilled its responsibility in terms of certification of laboratories and other detection facilities. We point to this fact because we have other monitoring stations. As Argentina, we have radionuclide stations that are located throughout the country. The most recent certification of one such facility occurred in the verification meeting on the 26th of June, when the RNC-02 radionuclide station was certified in the north of Argentina. I also think it's timely here to note, and that's why I'm doing it, the fact that it is important for all of us to contribute to strengthening the CTBT through strengthening the international monitoring system and the international data system. And we're pleased that a lot of certifications of the facilities that are in existence have been conducted. We are holding this conference in a complex juncture for non-proliferation and disarmament. There are clashes between powers and statements making threats to conduct nuclear tests and use nuclear weapons. Therefore, this is an appropriate conference to stop the modernization of nuclear weapons and the development of new ones. Argentina reiterates its profound concern at the increasing existence, modernization, use and threat of use of nuclear weapons. We also deplore their humanitarian consequences. Nuclear weapons must not be used under any circumstances whatsoever, and the use and threat of use of them is a crime against humanity, as well as a violation of international law, including of international humanitarian law. It's a violation of the UN Charter too. As such, we reiterate our staunch condemnation of any types of nuclear tests in any part of the world, and we insist that all states must refrain from conducting nuclear tests, other nuclear explosions, or any non-explosive tests, including subcritical experiments and those undertaken using simulations which are designed to develop and hone nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction. 25 years after the treaty opened to form for signature, we're delighted that so many have signed it, and we're delighted that 178 have ratified it. Many of those that need to ratify the treaty have already done so. We're pursuing its universalization under the Executive Secretary. We urge Annex II states that have not yet signed the treaty or haven't yet ratified it to take the measures necessary to do that without further delay. That will mean that we can contribute to our ultimate goal of building a safer world. It's time to take concrete steps towards that goal. Thank you.
Doy las gracias.
I thank the distinguished Secretary of Foreign Affairs of Argentina, Mr. Paulo Tetamanti. I now invite His Excellency Yong Ming Park, Deputy Minister for Multilateral and Global Affairs of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea to take the floor. Thank you.
Co-Presidents and Excellencies, at the outset, I thank the co-presidents for their leadership in chairing this important conference. My delegation also commends the Executive Secretary of the CTBT, Dr. Robert Floyd, for his tireless efforts in advancing the universalization of the CTBT. Under his leadership, 8 new countries have ratified the treaty. We urge the remaining 8 Annex II states to sign or ratify the CTBT without further delay. Distinguished delegates, the DPRK persists in its reckless pursuit of nuclear weapons, openly violating multiple international laws, including UN Security Council resolutions. The DPRK is the only country to have conducted nuclear tests this century and is even publicly boasting about them. The DPRK's provocative behavior continues with the looming possibility of a 7th nuclear test at any moment of its choosing. Such attitude fundamentally contradicts the very objective we seek to achieve through the CTBT. In this light, we welcome the final declaration of this conference, which calls upon the DPRK not to conduct further nuclear tests in a strong and unequivocal tone. Excellencies, the Republic of Korea, as one original state signatory to the treaty, has taken various efforts to enhance the CTBTO's verification and monitoring capabilities. These efforts include the modernization of the Korean Seismological Research Station, which is part of the CTBTO's international monitoring system. Furthermore, the CTBTO and the Korea Institute of Geoscience and Mineral Resources will co-host an expert group meeting next month to enhance data analysis capacity of experts in this field. We also place significant importance on the engagement with the youth, as illustrated by the inspiring dialogue Dr. Floyd had with Korean youth representative for disarmament and non-proliferation during his visit to Seoul last month. We will keep promoting such engagement to enable the future generation to understand the vital role of the CTBT in realizing our ultimate goal of a world without nuclear weapons, while reaffirming my government's unwavering commitment to prompt ratification and universalization of CTBT. I conclude my remarks. I thank you.
Doy las gracias.
I wish to thank Mr. Park for his declarations. As the Deputy Minister for Multilateral and Global Affairs in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Korea, I now give the floor to Her Excellency Cecile Hillier, Director of the International Security and Disarmament Division within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade of New Zealand. You have the floor, Madam.
Thank you, Co-Presidents Norway and Panama, Executive Secretary Rob Floyd, Excellencies. The achievement of a world free of nuclear weapons is one of the core long-standing tenets of New Zealand's foreign policy, reflected in our unwavering support for the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and our status as a founding member of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. A complete ban on nuclear weapons testing is one of the key steps to achieving such a world, making the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty a critical component of global disarmament and non-proliferation efforts. New Zealand continues to hold that the treaty's entry into force would represent a vital boost to these efforts, particularly at a time when the threat posed by nuclear weapons is rising. Central to the effectiveness of the norm against nuclear testing is universalization of the CTBT. In this regard, we commend the diligent efforts of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organisation under the leadership of Executive Secretary Robert Floyd. These efforts have borne significant fruit. Since the 12th Article 14 conference in 2021, we have seen a further 8 countries ratify the treaty, including Solomon Islands, Sri Lanka, Dominica, Equatorial Guinea, Gambia, Sao Tome e Principe, Timor-Leste, and Tuvalu. New Zealand will continue to advocate for treaty universalisation, particularly in our own South Pacific region. While efforts to promote the CTBT's universalisation since the last Article 14 conference have been fruitful and encouraging, there is still much work to be done. Once again, New Zealand urges all states, and in particular the remaining 8 Annex II states, to sign and ratify the treaty as soon as possible. Another way in which the CTBTO has sought to advance the treaty universalisation is through the provision of technical capacity building in nuclear non-proliferation and detection to states around the world. New Zealand has been pleased to support these efforts by way of a voluntary contribution this year to the organisation's Technical Experts Support Programme. New Zealand also welcomes the ongoing strengthening of the treaty's verification regime, particularly the international monitoring system. This system has not only given the international community confidence regarding the accurate detection of nuclear testing, but it has also made effective contributions to tsunami warning systems, including in our own Pacific region. Sadly, the integrity of the treaty's verification regime has been jeopardized by Russia's illegal and unjustified war on Ukraine, which has put at risk Ukraine's certified IMS seismic station. Our thoughts remain with the Ukrainian people, who continue to be severely affected by the hardships of the war. New Zealand also remains deeply concerned by North Korea's provocative and destabilizing behaviour in connection with its ongoing efforts to advance its illegal nuclear and ballistic missile test programs. We urge North Korea to refrain from conducting any further tests and to heed long-standing international calls to return to diplomacy. Finally, New Zealand calls for the widest support among member states for the General Assembly's resolution on the CTBT, which we take each year with Australia and Mexico. This resolution will be tabled at the forthcoming session and recognises the treaty as a fundamental instrument in the pursuit of nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the Distinguished Director for International Affairs and Disarmament within the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of New Zealand. I now invite Mr. Marcelo Zambrana Torello, General Director of Multilateral Relations of the plurinational state of Bolivia, to take the floor. A very good afternoon, distinguished co-presidents. Distinguished Dr. Floyd, I extend to you the brotherly greetings of my country. I was grateful to have you visiting us in Bolivia a few weeks ago, and now it's a joy to share this room with you at this important conference in a context in which the maintenance of peace and security has become increasingly challenging, and given the level of trust that reigns internationally, as well as the division that there is therein with more and more conflicts, the plurinational state of Bolivia, as a founding state of the United Nations, will always be committed to defending and strengthening multilateralism and to continuing to contribute to disarmament in strict adherence with international law from a perspective where we focus on peace, social justice, the well-being of people, and peaceful coexistence. The ratification of the CTBT is a crucial step towards the consolidation of peace and peaceful coexistence and towards the prevention of nuclear conflicts. Every nuclear test increases tension at a global level and constitutes a threat to peace. This treaty is a crucial component of the non-proliferation and nuclear disarmament regime. Bolivia ratified the CTBT in October 1999, and today at this conference, once again, we reaffirm our unwavering position against nuclear tests. The entry into force of CTBT is a solid commitment to international peace and security. Consequently, the ratification of the treaty bears witness to our commitment to nuclear disarmament. When we acceded to that treaty, we reaffirmed our intention to move towards a world free of nuclear weapons, and we take this opportunity to appeal to Annex II states to ratify the treaty without further delay to allow its entry into force. We cannot allow a situation whereby this treaty retains its legal status quo. The fact it hasn't been able to enter into force after 27 years since it opened for signature constitutes a major loophole in our international body of law. That warns us of the fact that we need to continue working towards a world free of nuclear explosions. The entry of CTBT into force is crucial for the well-being of all of us and the stability of coming generations. Together we must take tangible measures and demonstrate our commitment to a safer world and one free of nuclear weapons. We must work together to resolve the inconsistencies lying in the fact that some states promote nuclear disarmament when they haven't yet ratified the CTBT, and that means that there is still a possibility to undertake nuclear tests. In conclusion, the ratification of the CTBT is a moral and strategic imperative. It is a step towards a safer world, a more peaceful world, and a more sustainable world. We must work tirelessly to make that commitment a reality and to guarantee a better future for all. Consequently, Bolivia aligns itself with the declaration of measures to facilitate the timely entry into force of the CTBT. Many thanks.
Doy las gracias.
I wish to thank Mr. Marcelo Zambrano Torello, General Director of Multilateral Relations of the Plurinational State of Bolivia. I am now delighted to invite His Excellency Mr. Mark Sea, Deputy Permanent Representative of Singapore, to take the floor.
Thank you, Co-Presidents, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. I thank the Secretary-General for convening this conference, which has provided us the opportunity to collectively renew our commitment to the full implementation and entry into force of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Singapore welcomes the declaration adopted earlier today, which charts concrete and realistic steps towards this goal. The CTBT is a key pillar of the multilateral nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament architecture. It plays an essential and complementary role to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. Together, these two instruments provide measures to address the dangers posed by both horizontal and vertical nuclear proliferation in a transparent, verifiable manner. We are encouraged by the 8 new ratifications of the CTBT since this conference was last held in 2021. However, we are disappointed that the CTBT is still unable to enter into force almost 3 decades after its adoption. We urge all remaining countries, and in particular the 8 Annex II states, to sign and ratify the CTBT as soon as possible. Co-Presidents, we also commend the Preparatory Commission for the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization, along with the extensive outreach conducted by Executive Secretary Dr. Robert Floyd, for encouraging new ratifications of the CTBT, as well as operationalizing the monitoring and verification mechanism that underpins the CTBT. This includes installing over 90% of the international monitoring systems network and the ongoing work to build up on-site inspection capabilities. These practical measures and the availability of independent, verifiable information are crucial to build trust and confidence among member states and ensure the CTBT's effectiveness upon its entry into force. Co-Presidents, even though the CTBT has yet to enter into force, we have largely achieved an international norm against testing of nuclear weapons this century, with only one exception. This has lowered the risk of a nuclear arms race and brought about a more stable and peaceful world. However, this cannot be taken for granted, especially in today's geopolitical climate. Singapore therefore calls on all member states to concretize and not unravel the important work done under the CTBT and to create a safer world for all. Thank you for your attention.
Agradezco al
I thank the distinguished Deputy Permanent Representative of Singapore for that statement. I now give the floor to Mr. Keith McBean, Deputy Permanent Representative of Ireland. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the co-chairs, Norway and Panama, and to South Africa and Italy for their contribution. Executive Secretary, distinguished delegates. Ireland aligns with the statement by the European Union and makes the following remarks in a national capacity. Ireland is a steadfast supporter of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. In this regard, Ireland, in its capacity as President of the United Nations Security Council for the month of September 2021, hosted a high-level briefing on the CTBT to mark its 25th anniversary. The expressions of support for the treaty by all UN Security Council members underline the importance of the CTBT as a vital part of the nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation architecture. The meeting was addressed by the Executive Secretary of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty Organization, the first time the Executive Secretary has addressed the Security Council. The CTBT is an important step towards a world free from nuclear weapons. Now, after 27 years, it is more important than ever for the CTBT to enter into force. Ireland continues to call individually on all 8 remaining Annex II states to demonstrate leadership and join the CTBT without delay. In the meantime, Ireland calls for strict observance of the global moratorium on nuclear weapons testing. We also welcome the ratifications by non-Annex II states since our last conference and encourage continued progress in this regard. We sadly are all too aware of the enduring damage that nuclear testing has caused over generations to human health and the environment. It would be reprehensible to consider ever undertaking such testing again. Ireland strongly condemns the testing of nuclear weapons by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the only breach this century of the international norm against testing. These tests, in blatant violation of UN Security Council resolutions, are a threat to international peace and security. We call for DPRK's immediate signature and ratification of the CTBT, as well as a return to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and full cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency. While there is much progress still to be made, the past 27 years have also delivered key positive developments. The establishment of the Comprehensive Global Verification Regime has delivered important practical benefits, not only in detecting nuclear tests, but also in civilian applications. We are also encouraged by the series of ratifications that have taken place since the 2021 conference. I assure you that Ireland will continue to advocate strongly for the entry into force and universalisation of the CTBT. Thank you.
I thank the Deputy Permanent Representative of Ireland, Mr. Keith McBean, for that statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Kahiri Omar, Ambassador of Malaysia, to the Islamic Republic of Iran.
distinguished co-presidents, my delegation congratulates you on assuming the presidency of the 13th Conference on Facilitating the Entry into Force of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, CTBT. The convening of this conference pursuant to Article 14 of the CTBT is important in allowing states which have already ratified the treaty to consider measures consistent with international law which may be taken to accelerate the ratification process by others and to facilitate the early entry into force of the treaty. Malaysia signed the CTBT in July 1998 and ratified it in January 2008. We affirm that the treaty constitutes a critical component of the international nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation regime and contributes towards the prevention of the vertical proliferation of nuclear weapons. Preventing the testing of nuclear weapons gives impetus to the process of nuclear disarmament and the shared goal of a world free of nuclear weapons. In line with Malaysia's commitment to fully implementing the treaty, we maintain excellent working relations with the CTBTO Preparatory Commission. This is reflected in, inter alia, our hosting of the radionuclide monitoring station in Cameron Highlands since 2008 as part of the international monitoring system envisaged by the treaty. Co-Presidents, Malaysia welcomes the positive development of recent ratifications of the CTBT by Equatorial Guinea, Gambia, Timor-Leste, Tuvalu, Sao Tome and Principe, Solomon Islands, and Sri Lanka. Malaysia calls upon all states which have yet to do so to sign and ratify the CTBT as a matter of urgency. This applies with particular emphasis to the remaining Annex 2 states whose ratification is required for the treaty's entry into force. It is deeply concerning that 27 years after opening for signature of the CTBT, the prospect for entry into force of the treaty remains unclear. Notwithstanding its lack of entry into force, the CTBT has played an essential role in consolidating the global norm against nuclear testing. However, as noted by the UN High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, despite the current robustness of the global norm against testing, global trends are conspiring to undermine it. Amidst heightened international tensions and rising nuclear risks, nuclear arsenals continue to be expanded and modernized, even as key disarmament, arms control, and non-proliferation instruments are under immense strain. In these trying times, it is vital for us to uphold the CTBT, recognizing the devastating humanitarian consequences and environmental damages which nuclear testing has inflicted upon various communities. Co-Presidents, Malaysia strongly believes that universal adherence to the CTBT would contribute towards the process of nuclear disarmament and therefore towards the enhancements of international peace and security. Please be assured of Malaysia's unwavering commitment to the treaty and the CTBTO Preparatory Commission as we galvanize our efforts to achieve the entry into force of this landmark instrument. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Kahiri Omar for that statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Shuang Geng, Ambassador and Deputy Permanent Representative of China to the United Nations.
First of all, I would like to congratulate Panama and Norway on their election as co-presidents of this conference, and to express my appreciation to the co-presidents of the previous conference, Italy and South Africa. I would also like to commend Mr. Floyd, Executive Secretary of the Provisional Technical Secretariat, and his team for their work. The CTBT, concluded in 1996, has played an important role in curbing the nuclear arms race, reducing the risk of nuclear war, and maintaining global strategic stability, thus becoming a key pillar of the international nuclear disarmament and nuclear non-proliferation system. At present, a certain country is strengthening its military alliances, provoking confrontation, promoting the modernization of nuclear weapons, and the forward deployment of strategic nuclear and missile forces, undermining global strategic balance and stability, and raising the risk of a nuclear arms race and nuclear conflict. These negative developments and the continued deterioration of the international security environment further highlight the urgency and importance of promoting the early entry into force of the treaty. The international community should make joint efforts to strengthen the vitality of the treaty, accelerate its entry into force, and maintain and consolidate the international nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation regime. China would like to make the following propositions. First, we must practice genuine multilateralism. We should resolutely reject the Cold War mentality and the zero-sum game, insist on addressing each other's legitimate security concerns through dialogue and consultation, bridge differences and disputes, diffuse geopolitical conflicts, and create a favorable political environment for the entry into force of the treaty. Secondly, international obligations and commitments should be honored and double standards rejected. Putting its geopolitical interests above non-proliferation, a certain country engages in nuclear submarine cooperation that poses a serious risk of nuclear proliferation, violates the object and purpose of the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, and undermines regional peace and stability. This should be stopped immediately. Thirdly, we should adhere to the consensus on nuclear non-proliferation and reduce the risk of nuclear conflict. Nuclear weapon states should effectively reduce the role of nuclear weapons in their national security policies, abide by the moratorium on testing, adopt a no first-use policy, and conclude a treaty on mutual no first use of nuclear weapons. A certain nuclear weapon state should abandon the so-called extended deterrence policy and refrain from replicating nuclear sharing arrangements in the Asia-Pacific region. Fourthly, we should continue to move forward preparations for treaty compliance and carry out comprehensive and balanced construction of the international data center, the international monitoring system, and the on-site inspection mechanism so as to provide solid technical and capacity guarantees for the early entry into force of the treaty. China was one of the first countries to sign the CTBT, firmly supports the purpose and object of the treaty, adheres to the moratorium on testing, and actively supports and participates in building the international monitoring system. China is ready to continue to advance its cooperation with the Provisional Technical Secretariat and to promote the entry into force of the treaty. From the very first day of its possession of nuclear weapons, China has advocated the complete prohibition and thorough destruction of nuclear weapons. Regardless of changes in the international landscape, China will always pursue a nuclear strategy of self-defense, maintain its nuclear forces at the lowest level necessary for its national security, refrain from seeking nuclear parity, and refrain from engaging in a nuclear arms race with any nuclear weapon state. I would like to reiterate that China has never wavered in its support for the treaty and will never become an obstacle to its entry into force. China will continue to make unremitting efforts to promote the international nuclear disarmament process and the ultimate realization of a world free of nuclear weapons. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency, the Deputy Permanent Representative of China, for that statement. I now give the floor to Ms. Elina Kalku, Permanent Representative of Finland to the United Nations. You have the floor, Your Excellency.
Distinguished co-presidents, esteemed participants, in addition to the EU statement, I would like to add a few remarks in my national capacity, as Finland is a long-standing member of the Friends of the CTBT group. The CTBT has been open for signatures for over a quarter of a century, and this process should now be completed. Ratification by the Annex II states remains the key to the CTBT's entry into force, and we call on the remaining 8 states to sign and ratify the treaty without further delay. Universalization amongst non-annexed states is important, for strengthening the norm against nuclear testing. We welcome the latest ratifications by Solomon Islands and Sri Lanka, as well as signature by Somalia earlier this month. Pending entry into force of the CTBT, maintaining moratoria on nuclear testing remains crucial. I congratulate Dr. Robert Floyd, Executive Secretary of the CTBTO, for his tireless work regarding the universalization of the treaty. Our common goal is a world free of nuclear weapons. Concrete actions toward this end must be taken in the NPT review process. The significance of the CTBT must be recognized in the deliberations of the review process and in all international meetings related to nuclear disarmament. The CTBT has a uniquely strong verification regime. The international monitoring system provides independent and reliable information during compliance, ensuring compliance with the treaty. This is a great achievement of the CTBTO. The long-term sustainability of the network must be guaranteed. Finland, as the host of one of the IMS primary seismic stations, will continue its support to the network also in the future. Distinguished co-presidents, my country is a strong advocate of the treaty. The CTBT is a core element of the international nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation regime, and Finland will continue working towards its swift entry into force. Thank you very much.
I thank Ms. Kalku for her statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Redwan El Husseini, General Director of International Organizations and the United Nations in the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Morocco. You have the floor, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Co-President. Distinguished Co-Presidents, Executive Secretary of the CTBTO, ladies and gentlemen, my delegation welcomes the convening of this conference during the high-level week of the 78th session of the General Assembly, which allows us to renew our commitment to this unique treaty in the international disarmament regime and the regime for arms control and non-proliferation, which is both vertical and horizontal in nature. However, we cannot deny that the convening of this conference for the 13th time reminds us that despite our hopes to ensure a rapid entry into force of the treaty, as set forth by all of the international community at various times, we still have a long way to go and more efforts to be made to truly universalize the CTBT. Co-presidents Morocco is firmly convinced that universal accession to the CTBT would contribute to the nuclear disarmament process and therefore would strengthen international peace and security. However, it is regrettable that no tangible progress has been made when it comes to the signing and ratification of the CTBT by Annex II states. We once again urge all Annex II states that have not yet done so, have not yet ratified the treaty, to spare no effort to take the needed measures to ensure the entry into force of the treaty and to take this decisive step toward universalizing the CTBT. Co-Presidents, Morocco reaffirms its unwavering commitment and support for the goals of the CTBT, as well as initiatives to breathe new life into the process of the entry into force of this treaty. We have agreed to join the efforts of the Executive Secretary to promote this treaty among African states, and it is pleased that almost all African states have signed and ratified the CTBT. Morocco counts on the support of the remaining countries of the region to support this treaty. This support would allow Africa to be in line with its status as a nuclear-free zone and to improve international peace and security in the region. Co-presidents, besides its initial role, the verification system of the treaty has scientific and civilian advantages, including disaster alert systems, thanks to the civilian and scientific applications of technologies and the use of data. In addition, the verification regime of the CTBT has demonstrated its effectiveness by providing to all signatory states precise data in real time on major natural disasters, including earthquakes, tsunamis, and nuclear accidents, which today are major challenges for many countries in the world. The information collected by the International Data Center could be used for civilian scientific purposes. In light of this, it's important to find ways to guarantee that these capacities can benefit states parties to the treaty. Co-President Morocco appreciates the efforts made until now by the Preparatory Commission and the Secretariat, the PTS, for the implementation of the treaty, especially to establish the international monitoring system, as well as in situ inspections and the International Data Center in Vienna. Here, Morocco hosts one station accredited by the IMS. And we believe that building capacity in Africa through holding training seminars and workshops involving African experts would help further familiarize us with these technologies, which could be also used for civilian and scientific purposes. And this is why Morocco continues to encourage the PTS to continue its awareness-raising and training efforts for experts in developing countries, especially those on the African continent. And we reaffirm our commitment to cooperating closely with the CTBTO, especially through the National Center for Technical Research in Morocco, in order to develop the capacity of African experts. Co-presidents, in closing, Morocco believes that the consolidation of multilateralism and international cooperation remain crucial elements to provide a universal and effective response to the global threat of proliferation. Morocco remains deeply committed to the entry into force of the CTBT and will provide constant, unwavering support to international efforts to promote this treaty. We fully support the content of the final declaration that will be adopted after this conference. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the Distinguished Director of International Affairs of international organizations, and that is working within the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Morocco. And I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Kazakhstan. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, dear co-chairs, co-presidents, dear colleagues. Though Dr. Floyd is not here, but also with him, I express my sincere gratitude to the Executive Secretary, Dr. Robert Floyd, and his team for their tireless efforts for the CTBT to enter into force, as well as to strengthen its verification regime. I also thank Norway and Panama for their leadership as co-coordinators of the CTBT Article 14 process, and express our deep appreciation to the outgoing co-presidents, South Africa and Italy, for their laudable efforts. Dear colleagues, the closure of Semipalatinsk nuclear test site, 29th of August 1991, holds great symbolic significance for both Kazakhstan and the world, leading to the adoption of the CTBT in 1996. Since then, Kazakhstan has consistently supported the treaty and the build-up for its verification regime. At the initiative of Kazakhstan, the United Nations General Assembly instituted 29th of August as the International Day Against Nuclear Tests. The CTBT in a natural way complements the NPT, which also recognizes the critical importance of ending nuclear test explosions. Kazakhstan is a part of the Treaty on the Nuclear Weapon-Free Zone in Central Asia, also known as the Semipalatinsk Treaty, with a view to implement the NPT and to make this sub-region a zone of peace. Dear colleagues, Considerable progress has been made since the last Article 14 conference towards universalizing the treaty. We wholeheartedly welcome the recent ratification by Equatorial Guinea, Sao Tome and Principe, the Solomon Islands, Somalia and Sri Lanka, which should synergize further achievements. We urge all states that have not yet done so to sign and ratify the treaty without delay, in particular the remaining 8 states listed in the Annex 2 of the treaty. While states maintain the existing moratoria on nuclear weapons testing and other nuclear explosions, they do not replace the legally binding effect of the treaty when it's in force. Mr. President, the CTBT, International Monitoring System, is vital for global security, as well as early warning for natural disasters and phenomena. Kazakhstan strengthened this system through its 5 stations as part of the IMS. Having hosted the first CTBTO integrated field exercise in 2008, Kazakhstan fully shares Sri Lanka's offer to conduct this exercise in 2025. These exercises, we believe, and its on-site inspections will be a strong deterrent to potential violators once the treaty enters into force. Kazakhstan takes an integrated and interconnected view of all key treaties in its various roles. As chair of the 2nd session of the Preparatory Committee for the 11th Review Conference of the Parties of the NPT in 2024, and the president of the 3rd meeting of the TPNW States Parties in 2029. Mr. President, colleagues, the consecutive failures of the NPT Review Conference to reach consensus demonstrate extreme divergence of views and lack of cooperation among the state parties. This should not discourage, but rather trigger the remaining Annex 2 states to ratify the treaty. In contrast, the Article 14 conferences have always succeeded in adopting final documents, unlike certain other disarmament fora in the past. I express my sincere hope that the present momentum will accelerate our ultimate inspiration for the CTBT. I thank you.
Doy las gracias.
I thank His Excellency Akan Rakhmettuning, Ambassador, Permanent Representative of Kazakhstan to the United Nations. I now give the floor to His Excellency Bayer Tasib Lai, Ambassador, Deputy Permanent Representative of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Madam, you have the floor.
The Kingdom of the Netherlands fully aligns itself with the statement of the European Union. In light of the challenges of the current unstable reality, international cooperation is more important than ever. We must continue to work on non-proliferation and disarmament. It is therefore crucial that we meet today to support the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty and the work of the CTBTO. The treaty serves as a key component of the international non-proliferation and disarmament regime. With clear definitions and an operational international system of verification, the CTBT is a crucial part of the course towards a nuclear weapon-free world. Mr. Chair, the Kingdom of the Netherlands appreciates the tireless efforts by the Executive Secretary to increase the number of ratifications. We welcome the recent signing of the CTBT by Somalia. The Executive Secretary has our full support in his continued work to bring the importance of the CTBT to the fore. Yet, in the end, it is not in the power, nor is it the main responsibility of the Executive Secretary to bring about the entry into force of the Test Ban Treaty. It is up to the states concerned and up to us, the member states that have already ratified the treaty, to call on and persuade those who remain outside its fold to join, and through their ratification, bring about the entry into force the world so urgently seeks. The heart of this treaty is the International Monitoring System, IMS. It is a unique international tool with over 300 monitoring stations worldwide, spanning the Earth from South Africa to Finland and from Argentina to the north of Canada. The IMS plays a pivotal role in the effectiveness of CTBT. It provides for the eyes and ears of the international community. The sensitive instruments of the IMS ensure that no nuclear test explosion can remain hidden from sight. This verification system strengthens trust and confidence among signatory states. It is therefore important for the consolidation of international non-proliferation and disarmament efforts that states that have not signed or ratified the treaty yet to do so as soon as possible. The value of the IMS is not limited to detecting nuclear tests. The system provides for valuable data that the scientific community can use. It has proven its value as a warning system for detecting tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, and earthquakes. The organization can take pride in the way that the IMS is functioning. Mr. Chair, at the same time, looking forward, there are issues we must address together. As the system ages, it will ask our continued support to maintain and expand upon the current network of monitoring stations to counter depreciation. This will require our continued political, technical, and financial efforts. We should therefore continue to look at ways with which we can integrate the most recent scientific developments in the IMS. In closing, the Kingdom of the Netherlands is and will remain a proud contributor to the development of the IMS and the work of the CTBTO. Thank you.
I thank the Ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and I invite His Excellency Rytis Paulauskas, Permanent Representative of Lithuania to the United Nations, to take the floor.
Distinguished co-presidents, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, permit me to congratulate Norway and Panama on assuming the presidency of this conference, and to thank Italy and South Africa for their coordinating role in the previous years. Lithuania fully aligns itself with the statement of the European Union, and in my national capacity, I would like to reiterate a few points. Co-presidents, we continue to witness a deteriorating security situation, increased global and regional tensions caused by irresponsible state actors. We strongly condemn Russia's unjustified and unprovoked aggression against Ukraine, annexation of Ukrainian territories, dangerous nuclear rhetorics and actions that also include Russia's intent to station its nuclear weapons in the territory of Belarus. Co-presidents, through the ratification of the CTBT, we all confirmed our commitment not to carry out any nuclear weapon tests, explosion, or any other nuclear explosion, and to prohibit and prevent any such nuclear explosion at any place under its jurisdiction or control. We strongly condemn the nuclear tests previously carried out by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. We also expressed our concern regarding Russia's announcement that it will ensure its preparedness to conduct a nuclear test. We wish to underline the importance of maintaining national moratoria on nuclear weapon test explosions and of refraining from any action that would undermine the treaty's objective and purpose. Co-presidents, the CTBT not only prohibits all nuclear test explosions, it also is intended to help curb the spread of nuclear weapons and impede nuclear arms competition. The current threats to global peace and security make it more urgent than ever to renew all efforts for the universalization of the treaty. It is also worth recalling that arms control mechanisms were not designed just for the good and peace times. They can diffuse tensions and prevent escalation under the most difficult of the circumstances. As universalization of the CTBT remains our priority, we are pleased to note that the Federal Republic of Somalia has recently signed the CTBT. Since our last conference in 2021, 8 more states ratified this treaty. The signature by 187 states and ratification by 178 states to date, the CTBT is approaching universality. We urge all states that have not yet done so to sign and ratify the treaty without further delay. Their accession to the treaty would advance the global norm against nuclear testing. There is no doubt that the CTBT contributes significantly to the international security, non-proliferation, and disarmament landscape. The value of the treaty is unquestionable, but we cannot take for granted the norm against nuclear testing until it's legally binding. And finally, I wish to highlight the leadership of the CTBTO Executive Secretary, Dr. Robert Floyd, and to thank him and his professional team for their significant work supporting global security. I thank you.
Doy las gracias.
I thank His Excellency Rytis Paulauskas, Permanent Representative of Lithuania to the United Nations, and I now give the floor to Her Excellency Esquiselda Lopez, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of El Salvador to the United Nations. Many thanks indeed to the co-presidents. My country is participating yet again, and allow me to emphasize that point once again, in this Article 14 conference. And that participation bears witness to our staunch commitment as a state party to the treaty. However, this conference is no cause for celebration, given that once again we are meeting in a context in which the treaty has not yet entered into force, despite the fact that it is hugely relevant. We here remind all states that this conference has a mandate which inter alia includes expediting the ratification of the treaty. Consequently, we welcome the recent signing by Somalia of the treaty and Sri Lanka's ratification. That means that now the CTBT has 187 signatory countries and 178 countries have ratified it. However, it is in our view regrettable that despite the fact that in only 2 days, in other words on the 24th of September, we will mark 27 years since the treaty opened for signature, the treaty has not yet entered into force. It is for this reason that El Salvador once again appeals to the 8 Annex II countries to take measures relevant for the signing and ratification of the treaty without delays nor with any conditions attached. In spite of the above, it is laudable that that treaty has created an international arena where there is a tacit prohibition of nuclear tests, and the treaty has become an almost universal instrument in the field of non-proliferation. However, that does not substitute the legal nature of the commitments and provisions in this field under international law. Moreover, El Salvador recognizes the crucial importance of the treaty for international efforts against proliferation and for disarmament and to create a world free of nuclear weapons. The treaty is an integral component of the international disarmament and non-proliferation architecture, and it, in this sense, goes hand in hand with the NPT, the TPNW, and other relevant regional instruments. It is also worth recognizing the work of the CTBT's Preparatory Commission to establish the international verification regime. That regime includes, inter alia, the International Monitoring System and the International Data Center. Both of those are fully operational. Those verification systems have proven able to detect the conduct of nuclear tests in real time. Moreover, they have other civilian applications that are hugely significant for our understanding of the phenomena of our Earth. These include the exploration of marine life, of the effects of climate change, uses for civil aviation, early warning mechanisms, and mechanisms to respond to natural disasters. Co-presidents, the moratoria on nuclear tests do have a purpose. They do not, however, substitute legally binding norms. Consequently, we invite all member states of the United Nations General Assembly to step up their common efforts to achieve the timely universalization of the CTBT. Allow me to conclude by stating that El Salvador is a faithful believer in multilateralism and dialogue. As such, we hope that in a not too distant future there will be no need to convene this conference. I thank you.
Doy las gracias a
I thank Her Excellency Griselda Lopez, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of El Salvador. I thank her for her address. I am now going to invite Ms. Rosanis Romero Lopez to take the floor. She is representing the Permanent Mission of Cuba to the United Nations. You have the floor. Thank you, co-presidents, distinguished colleagues. We wish to express our gratitude for the work of the outgoing co-presidents. We congratulate the new co-presidents and the other elected members of the Bureau. We are grateful for the convening of this meeting. Its importance grows in the face of the continued modernization and increase in nuclear arsenals. These arsenals are increasingly powerful and destructive in nature. Cuba has retained a historic position in favor of nuclear disarmament. That is a principle of our foreign policy as enshrined in our Constitution. Cuba's ratification of the CTBT is in line with its commitment to nuclear disarmament as the utmost priority in the disarmament arena. The prohibition and cessation of nuclear tests of any type is crucial if we are to achieve that goal. The abundant resources that are today devoted to developing and modernizing nuclear weapons must be redirected towards promoting development, to tackling the negative consequences of climate change, to guaranteeing food security, and to dealing with other priorities related to the very survival of humankind. Co-presidents, there is a great synchrony between the norms established by the CTBT and the TPNW that provides for the absolute prohibition of conducting nuclear tests. The only effective way of making the terrible threat of nuclear weapons disappear is to eliminate them totally. To achieve that goal, it is vital to have a complete and effective prohibition of all nuclear tests, including those conducted via non-explosive means, and we also need to see the closing and dismantling of facilities used for those purposes and their related infrastructure. Co-presidents, the criminal, economic, commercial and financial blockade imposed by the government of the United States on Cuba affects all spheres of the lives of our people. This blockade has even made it difficult to establish a national data center in our country within the context of activities monitored by the CTBT. That is a violation of the provisions of the treaty. We thank the CTBTO Secretariat for facilitating Cuba's participation in the capacity-building activities of the organization. Cuba will continue to strictly adhere to its obligations as a state party to the CTBT. At the same time, we will never cease to claim our legitimate rights. Achieving nuclear disarmament is an issue of survival. We deserve and we need a world of lasting peace which is just and sustainable for all, a world free of nuclear weapons for the well-being of current and future generations. Thank you.
Doy las gracias a la
I thank the distinguished representative of Cuba. I now give the floor to Mr. Amir Essam, representing Egypt.
Excellencies, co-presidents, excellencies, ministers, ambassadors, permanent representatives, executive secretary of the Preparatory Technical Secretariat, Dr. Floyd, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, let me congratulate Norway and Panama for assuming presidency of this conference and express our gratitude for their diligent work during its preparatory phase. We assure you of our full support and cooperation. Allow me also to thank the two predecessors, co-presidents Italy and South Africa, and to thank the Executive Secretary of the CTBT, Dr. Robert Floyd, as well as the Preparatory Technical Secretariat for their efforts in this regard. We gather here today to exchange views on possible ways forward to facilitate the entry into force of the treaty. Egypt believes it is an apt time to undertake two major reflections, the first of which is to look back at the history of the treaty, while the second is to look at the bigger and rather alarming picture of disarmament and non-proliferation around the globe today. Looking back at the history of the CTBT, Egypt was not only among the pioneering states which participated in negotiating the treaty, it was also among the first states to sign it. From this standpoint, Egypt engaged in good faith with this global call to put an end once and for all to nuclear tests. Egypt believes that the CTBT is indeed a unique treaty as it provides concrete measures in support of both nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation horizontally and vertically. On many occasions, this fact is often overlooked, and some tend to focus solely on the environmental and humanitarian impacts of nuclear testing, which is understandable given all the horrors they have caused to humanity and to our planet. However, we must not forget that the key value of the CTBT is in its role in nuclear non-proliferation and, more importantly, as a tool that should ultimately give way to nuclear disarmament. On this same premise, Egypt, in the same good faith, joined the NPT and is fully implementing its respective obligations under the treaty. We equally support the CTBT and its verification regime in various ways, including by hosting the first ever regional NDC workshop for Arabic-speaking states in 2020, and we look forward to hosting the OSI regional introductory course early next year. In addition, Egypt has consistently participated in the Article 14 conference process since its inception. Also, we have consistently called for strengthening the CTBT and its role through the various NPT review conferences, as we believe that both treaties can be mutually reinforcing. Excellencies, now as we look at the bigger picture, we need to recognize that the CTBT does not exist in isolation, and it should be addressed within the context of the wider disarmament and non-proliferation regime. We are of the view that in order for the call for the entry into force of the CTBT to be realistic and credible, it should go hand in hand with working to ensure that the cornerstone of the non-proliferation regime itself, the NPT, is universalized, and that nuclear weapon states fulfill their legal obligations pursuant to Article 6 of the NPT and their commitments agreed by consensus at the review conferences towards the total, verifiable, and irreversible elimination of nuclear weapons. Short of that, the nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation regime in its entirety remains at risk. Any call on states to ratify the CTBT must take into account the respective status of each state. The placement of all the states required to ratify the treaty on equal footing is illogical and can prove to be counterproductive as it disregards the realities on the ground. Once again, Egypt reaffirms that nuclear weapon states and states which are non-party to the NPT have a special responsibility to achieve the universality of the CTBT. This premise is clearly elaborated at Action 10 of the 2010 NPT Action Plan. Co-presidents, at the regional level, the Middle East continues to be one of the most flagrant examples of the threats to non-proliferation regime due to the lack of universal adherence to the NPT. This asymmetry in legal obligations has created a severe imbalance in the region's security architecture. It is therefore undeniable that the status of the NPT in our region has a direct bearing on the prospects of the entry into force of the CTBT. Egypt continues to diligently strive to create a zone free of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East. At every opportunity, we call for the implementation of the Middle East Resolution from the 1995 NPT Review and Extension Conference. Co-presidents, to conclude, the failure of 2 consecutive NPT review conferences since the indefinite extension in 1995 constitute a clear and unprecedented regression. The dynamics of the first session of the preparatory committee recently convened in Vienna is another testament to this alarming situation that requires immediate attention. Such setbacks are only exacerbated by the continued refusal of some states to accede to the NPT. Moreover, this is also coupled with aggressive nuclear postures in military doctrines of the nuclear weapon states and announcements to expand, upgrade, or modernize nuclear arsenals. Let our conference today be an opportunity to frankly address these major root causes that continue to hamper the entry into force of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. This is the bigger picture that we may not overlook. I thank you.
Distinguidos delegados,
Distinguished delegates, we are coming to the end of our speakers list. I wish to announce that I'm now going to give the floor to the following speakers. That's Algeria and Canada. And then, subsequently, if there are no objections, I will give the floor to the representative of the European Union in accordance with the standard practice of this conference, and that practice has been in place for many years. It is established practice to proceed in that way. I see that the Russian Federation has an arm raised. You have the floor. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Co-President. Perhaps this is an established practice, but it was appropriate when there were no objections. And now I'd like to remind you all that the rules of procedure of our conference do not provide for statements by regional organizations and associations. They can present their positions in written form but not take the floor. Therefore, in this case, despite the fact that this practice was established, I insist that we ought to follow the rules of procedure. Thank you.
I simply wish to remind the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation that in the past we have allowed representatives of groups of states to make statements on behalf of member states of this group. So I do beg the indulgence of you, Mr. Ambassador, so that we can keep that practice in place and hear, when the time comes, from the representative of that group of states who regularly issues opinions to this forum. I wish to ask the distinguished representative very, very respectfully indeed to allow us the possibility, when the time comes, of inviting that representative to make a statement.
Distinguished Co-President, I have expressed my objection not just to be contrarian. This is not just a whim. My position, unfortunately, is dictated by the behavior of the European Union at a number of international meetings on nuclear non-proliferation and arms control. This took place at the first session of the preparatory committee of the NPT review conference, and I suspect that it will take place again now. The EU is not a participant in the relevant international treaties and bears no obligations under them. And yet it is speaking out with accusations against my country. Accusations that often have nothing to do with the topic of the international meetings or of the content of the relevant international treaties. Therefore, unfortunately, with deep regret, I am forced to state that I cannot agree to hearing a statement of a deviation from the rules of procedure. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative ambassador of the Russian Federation. And we're now going to move down our speakers list as established. I now wish to invite the distinguished representative of the Permanent Mission of Algeria to the United Nations, Mr. Leberzlawi, to take the floor.
Mr. President, distinguished co-presidents, excellencies, and distinguished participants. At the outset, the Algerian delegation congratulates Norway and Panama for their election to assume the presidency of the 13th Conference on Facilitating the Entry into Force of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty and commends the efforts done by South Africa and Italy as a co-presidents of the 12th Article 14 Conference. My delegation congratulates and encourages the Executive Secretary, Dr. Robert Floyd, and his staff for their sustained commitment to the entry into force of the CTBT and for their efforts in development in its verification regime. Algeria has always been convinced that the conclusion of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty is a triumph of multilateral diplomacy and a tangible proof of its efficiency in the field of security and disarmament through negotiation. My country, who ratified the CTBT 20 years ago, reaffirms once again its unwavering commitment and support for the objectives of the CTBT and its Provisional Technical Secretariat, as well as the initiatives to reinvigorate the processes to get the treaty into force at the earliest. In this vein, Algeria welcomes the ratifications registered since 2021, confirming the treaty's importance through the adherence of Equatorial Guinea, Gambia, Sao Tome and Principe, Dominica, Timor-Leste, Tuvalu, Solomon Islands, and Sri Lanka, bringing the number of ratifications to 178 out of the 188 signatory states. My delegation believes that CTBT do represent one vital element in the field of nuclear disarmament, which contributes in upholding the non-proliferation regime and which is considered as a valuable factor in the preservation of international peace and security. Algeria maintains an excellent working relationship with the CTBTO and remains fully committed to the implementation of the treaty. It is also pleased to note that much progress has been achieved since the treaty was opened for signature more than a quarter of a century ago. Nevertheless, the convening of this conference for the 13th time is another clear reminder, indicating that much more has to be done to achieve the treaty's entry into force. Co-presidents, Algeria, who suffered a lot and still suffering from the horrors and catastrophic consequences on both mankind and environment due to the nuclear tests carried out on its territories, remains convinced that the total elimination of nuclear weapons is the only guarantee against the dangers of these weapons of mass destruction. My delegation regrets the fact that no progress has been made forwards towards the signing and ratification of the CTBT by the remaining Annex II states. and reiterates its solemn appeal to all parties that have not yet done so, particularly those of Annex II, to take concrete steps to ratify the treaty without delay. Co-Presidents, as a state party to the Pilindaba Treaty, Algeria is a fervent promoter of the creation of nuclear weapon-free zones, aiming at establishing international peace and security on one hand, and strengthening the nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament regime on the other. For this reason, Algeria remains firmly committed to the establishment of a nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East, in accordance with the relevant decisions of the NPT review conferences, and as well as the pertinent UN resolutions. Finally, my delegation would like to reiterate that Algeria is fully aware and convinced that the consolidation of multilateralism and international cooperation remain essential elements in providing universal and effective responses to global proliferation threats. I thank you for your kind attention.
I thank you. Doy las gracias.
I thank the distinguished representative of Algeria for that statement. I now give the floor to Ms. Meline Svadjan, representing the Permanent Mission of Canada to the United Nations. You have the floor, madam.
Distinguished co-chairs, I wish to extend Canada's thanks for your hard work, as well as the work of the Preparatory Commission of the CTBT organization and the UN Office of Disarmament for putting together this conference and its final declaration. I also wish to thank Executive Secretary Dr. Robert Floyd for his tireless efforts in promoting the CTBT's entry into force. Thanks to his hard work, 8 new instruments of ratification have been deposited since we last met virtually in 2021. Canada welcomes the ratifications from Dominica, Equatorial Guinea, Gambia, Sao Tome and Principe, the Solomon Islands, Sri Lanka, Timor-Leste, and Tuvalu. We also congratulate Somalia for taking its first step towards ratification by signing the CTBT earlier this month. We encourage others to follow its example. Distinguished co-chairs, I would be remiss if I did not speak to the international environment in which this conference is taking place. Canada condemns in the strongest possible terms Russia's unjustifiable, full-scale invasion of Ukraine and its ongoing aggression, which serve as a near-daily reminder of the threat posed by nuclear weapons. Canada calls on Russia to withdraw its troops and military equipment from the internationally recognized territory of Ukraine immediately, completely, and unconditionally. Distinguished co-chairs, Canada remains a strong proponent of the CTBT, its entry into force, and its verification system. We have worked in our national capacity, as well as with our partners in the G7, the Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Initiative, and the Stockholm Initiative on Nuclear Disarmament to promote these priorities and bring the CTBT closer to universalization. We reiterate our call on all states that have not yet done so to ratify the treaty without any further delay. We recall that the 8 Annex II states that have yet to ratify the treaty bear special responsibility for the CTBT's entry into force. We encourage them to seek new and innovative ways to overcome any remaining obstacles, and to this end, offer Canada's continued support. Pending the treaty's entry into force, Canada is of the view that more can and should be done. We call on all states to continue to devote attention and resources to the international monitoring system, which has consistently demonstrated its ability to achieve the treaty's objectives. In this regard, Canada is proud to continue to work with Kazakhstan to build, install, and operationalize a radionuclide detection station, which will be established as a prototype cooperating national facility for the international monitoring system.
Distinguished co-presidents, we urge all states to enact or maintain voluntary national moratoria on nuclear testing while awaiting the entry into force of the treaty. These are important and necessary trust-building measures. This is especially the case for North Korea, the only state to have conducted a nuclear test during this century. We once again call on North Korea to abandon its nuclear weapons program. Canada continues to defend the idea that a diplomatic solution to the nuclear crisis on the Korean Peninsula is crucial and possible. And we'll continue to work closely with our allies and partners to make this a reality. In closing, distinguished co-presidents, the CTBTO and the international community can count on the unwavering support of Canada to facilitate the entry into force of the treaty. This is a treaty that is fully in effect, would provide tangible security benefits for all, and would help give impetus to our collective efforts to end the proliferation of nuclear weapons and to eliminate existing arsenals. Thank you.
Doy las gracias.
I thank Ms. Sverjan for that statement on behalf of Canada. I am now delighted to give the floor to Mr. Antonin Benjamin Bieke on behalf of the Permanent Mission of Côte d'Ivoire to the United Nations.
Merci, Madame et Monsieur.
Thank you, distinguished co-presidents. My delegation welcomes the holding of this 13th conference on the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, the goal of which is to assess the ratification process of the CTBT and to take tangible measures to breathe new life into it. On behalf of Her Excellency, Madam Kandia Kamiseko Kamara, Minister of State and Foreign Affairs of African Integration and the Diaspora, I'd like to congratulate Panama and Norway on their election to the presidency of this conference. My delegation has taken note of the report on the progress made in ratification presented by South Africa and Italy, and would like to warmly thank them for their valuable contributions. On this occasion, we would like to thank Secretary General Antonio Guterres for his tireless efforts to promote the rapid entry into force of this treaty. We also would like to commend the work done by Dr. Robert Floyd of the PTS. Distinguished co-presidents, the conference that we are holding today is taking place at a time when common peace and security have been jeopardized by various events. Like many countries, Côte d'Ivoire is concerned by major safety and security risks, nuclear risks in Ukraine, as well as persisting nuclear threats and their potential humanitarian consequences. These situations remind us that it is critical to make quick progress and to amplify our efforts to strengthen the multilateral framework of peace and security, of which the CTBT is an important part. Indeed, our treaty enjoys broad political support that has been increasingly bolstered by the recent ratifications by Dominica, Equatorial Guinea, Gambia, Timor-Leste, Tuvalu, Sao Tome and Principe, the Solomon Islands, and Sri Lanka, bringing the number of states that have ratified the treaty to 178. Côte d'Ivoire welcomes these ratifications, which help promote efforts to bring this treaty into force. Distinguished co-presidents, peace and security are critical for humanity. That is why my country, since it gained independence, has worked tirelessly for peace. This tradition of peace and dialogue is reflected through the ratification of the fundamental treaties on arms control and prohibition of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons. Côte d'Ivoire also takes part in the implementation of the international monitoring system of the CTBTO as a host country of 2 countries, infrasound and seismic station. However, despite the contribution of the CTBT, broadly recognized, to peace and security throughout the world, its entry into force is still uncertain due to the lack of ratification by a certain number of Annex II states. My delegation, therefore, would like to solemnly urge those Annex II states that have not yet ratified the treaty to do so, so that our treaty can enjoy effective implementation. Côte d'Ivoire will continue to make its humble contribution by promoting a reflection on a new approach in order to give new impetus to ratification as a process by stepping up dialogue and exchange on this important issue. Distinguished co-presidents, my country is also deeply interested in the civil and scientific applications of these technologies in the area of the nuclear field. This was reflected recently by the appointment of His Excellency Alassane Ouattara, President of Côte d'Ivoire, as African Champion of Science and Technology, Peaceful and Nuclear Technology of the African Commission for Nuclear Energy. The contribution of the IEA and CTBTO in the nuclear field and for civil and scientific applications has never been denied, and that's why I'd like to invite these organizations to step up their collaboration with AFCON to improve the implementation of the Pelindaba Treaty in order to make Africa a nuclear weapons-free zone and a region that helps to promote nuclear science and technology for the benefit of development. And on this note, I would like to close my statement in thanking you once again and reaffirming my country's commitment to a safer world free of nuclear weapons. Thank you.
Thank you. I thank the distinguished representative of Côte d'Ivoire for his statement. And I now invite Mr. Martin Frick, Director, Office of Foreign Affairs of the Principality of Liechtenstein, to take the floor.
Distinguished co-presidents, Liechtenstein welcomes this Article 14 conference as an opportunity to send a strong political signal for the urgent entry into force and nuclearization of the CTBT, in line with our common goal of a world free of nuclear weapons. This is more relevant than ever, given the doomsday clock now at 90 seconds to midnight, the closest to global catastrophe it has ever been, especially due to the Russian aggression against Ukraine. Liechtenstein commends the important work already accomplished by the CTBTO and its executive secretary. We appreciate the central position of the organization and its members in the nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation architecture and their contribution to a de facto moratorium on nuclear testing. The DPRK's failure to comply with the norm against nuclear testing constitutes a serious violation of international law, in particular the relevant Security Council resolutions. The remaining Annex II states, China, Egypt, Iran, Israel, and the United States, which have not yet ratified the treaty, and DPRK, India, and Pakistan, which have not yet signed it, bear the responsibility for the absence of a legally binding instrument against nuclear testing today, at a time when the number of conflicts around the world is increasing. This disengagement disregards the interests of the overwhelming majority of the international community and prevents the world from becoming a safer place. Distinguished co-presidents, in this period of pressure on the rules-based global community, we see signs of increased willingness by a few states to undermine the broader multilateral framework. But we also see strong support for multilateralism among the UN membership, strengthened by civil society advocacy. Liechtenstein welcomes the signature and ratification of the CTBT by Dominica, the new ratifications by Equatorial Guinea, Gambia, Sao Tome and Principe, Timor-Leste, and Tuvalu, as well as the ratifications by Sri Lanka and the Solomon Islands, and signature by Somalia and South Sudan this year, which are testimony to this. Looking at the area of disarmament in particular, broad majority coalitions have taken forward important initiatives to strengthen the international rule of law. Through its international monitoring system, the CTBT has already succeeded in establishing a reliable instrument to deter non-compliance. In order for the CTBT to enter into full force and thus fulfill its potential contribution to sustainable peace and security, we urge all remaining Annex II states to sign and ratify the treaty without further delay. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Liechtenstein for his statement, and I invite Mr. Jorge Aranda, Deputy Permanent Representative of Portugal to the United Nations, to take the floor.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, dear colleagues, as many have underscored today, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty is an effective multilateral tool of the non-proliferation and nuclear disarmament agenda, as it bans all nuclear explosions, whether for military or peaceful purposes. Since the treaty cannot formally enter into force until it is ratified by 44 specific states, we particularly urge them to sign and ratify the instrument. And let me, in this moment, congratulate the last 8 state parties that ratified the CTBT during 2022 and 2023, especially the 3 members of the community of Portuguese-speaking countries, São Tomé and Príncipe, Equatorial Guinea, and Timor-Leste. Portugal is a committed supporter of the 10 actions under the UN Secretary-General's Agenda for Disarmament. In particular, Action 4, bringing the CTBT into force, and Action 7, concludes a treaty banning fissile materials for nuclear weapons. Both of them would contribute to consolidating confidence and security building in a weakened security and defense system characterized by a dangerous erosion of the non-proliferation and disarmament architecture. At the European level, Portugal is engaged with the EU strategy against the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and the EU Global Strategy for Foreign and Security Policy and its Strategic Compass for Security and Defense. This broad framework favors and demands Portugal's support to the activities of the Preparatory Commission of the CTBTO to strengthen the capabilities of the treaty's monitoring and verification system, as well as its universalization. Indeed, we strongly believe that the universalization and early entry into force of the CTBT will significantly enhance the implementation of the NPT and the commitments made in its review process. But it will also contribute to further work on nuclear disarmament verification, to new steps in the area of risk reduction, and to the start of negotiations of a fissile material cut-off treaty at the Conference on Disarmament. Ratifying the CTBT will provide greater leverage over security dilemmas and enhance international peace and security, and at the same time it will ensure a legal barrier against nuclear testing, henceforth limiting the development of new types and new designs of nuclear weapons. Lastly, let me stress that we stand with our EU partners and NATO allies in unequivocally condemning the DPRK as the only state to have conducted nuclear tests in the 21st century. In this regard, we urge Pyongyang to cease all nuclear tests, as well as launches that use ballistic missile technology and related activities, as required under multiple UN Security Council resolutions, by abiding by international law and re-engaging in a credible and meaningful dialogue with the international community. Dear colleagues, promoting universal adherence to the CTBT is a matter of priority, so we call on all states that have not yet done so to keep the momentum and sign and ratify the treaty without preconditions or further delay. This will constitute a significant step towards enhancing international peace and security. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Portugal for his statement, and now I invite Mr. Roberto Vacima Chatmari from the Permanent Mission of Brazil to take the floor.
Thank you. Brazil congratulates Panama and Norway for the election as co-presidents and thanks Italy and South Africa for their leadership. We also thank Dr. Floyd for his constructive efforts towards universalization of this treaty. The delegation reiterates Brazil's commitment to the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty and is honored to join this 13th conference, the first that we hold in person since 2019. Brazil was one of the first countries to ratify the CTBT back in 1998 and has taken an active role in supporting the entry into force and universalization of this treaty as part of our broad efforts towards promoting nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. It is with regret that we note that we are no closer to entering into force today than we were when we last met in person 4 years ago in 2019. While we welcome the recent ratifications by Timor-Leste, Tuvalu, Dominica, Equatorial Guinea, Gambia, São Tomé and Príncipe, the Solomon Islands, and Sri Lanka, we are still waiting on accession by 8 Annex II states, including 2 NPT nuclear weapon states. We urge all remaining states to sign and ratify this treaty, which improves the security of nuclear and non-nuclear states alike. Pending entry into force, we strongly urge all states to abstain from nuclear tests, especially explosive tests. Yet the loss of momentum in the CTBT ratification mirrors a loss of momentum in nuclear disarmament more broadly. We are witnessing an erosion of nuclear disarmament machinery, illustrated inter alia by the failure of a second NPT review conference last year, as well as a decade-long deadlock in the nuclear track of the UNDC and the recent inability to reach consensus at the NPT Preparatory Committee in Vienna just last month. The machinery must be shored up and momentum must be restored. The entry into force of the CTBT is a good starting point for both of those things. Consolidating the norm against nuclear testing would send a powerful signal that the world is refocusing its attention on halting the development of new nuclear weapons as an important step towards reduction and elimination. This should include a halt to subcritical testing, computer simulations, the development of low and variable yield warheads, as well as any activity that runs counter to the principles of the CTBT. The accession of the 2 remaining NPT nuclear weapon states would do much to reinvigorate nuclear disarmament efforts and could be done simultaneously as a confidence-building measure in itself. The full membership of all NPT nuclear weapon states in the CTBT would in turn exert a powerful force for the universalization of the treaty, including with regard to non-NPT states possessing nuclear weapons. Nuclear proliferation often works in feedback loops. The pursuit of nuclear weapons by a given state provides a strong incentive for others to reciprocate. Yet so does disarmament. Positive actions, such as a permanent halt in weapons testing, reduce the risks for all and encourages others to do the same. The CTBT could be a valuable tool for breaking out of the current negative feedback loop of rising nuclear tensions and promoting a positive loop of increased confidence and reductions in arsenals. We reiterate that the total elimination of nuclear weapons is the only pathway towards true security for all. Let us begin by taking the first but crucial step of banning nuclear tests. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Brazil. And I now invite Mr. Troels Gravel Bay of the Permanent Mission of Denmark to take the floor.
Distinguished co-presidents, I would like to be able to begin by congratulating Norway and Panama on your election as co-presidents, and to express gratitude to Italy and South Africa for their work in the preceding years. I would also like to thank the Executive Secretary, Dr. Floyd, and his team for their tireless efforts in advancing the aims of the treaty. Denmark aligns itself with the EU statement, which I believe we should be able to hear in this room. I support the co-chair's interpretation that we should follow the established practice and allow groups representing countries to speak at this conference. In my national capacity, I would like to add the following statement. The CTBT is a key element of the nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation regime with the NPT at its core. The contribution of the CTBT in establishing a strong norm against nuclear weapons testing is widely recognized. We welcome the impressive number of new signatories and ratifications since our last conference. What we really need, nonetheless, is for the treaty to enter into force. A legally binding instrument would outlaw nuclear weapons tests for good. For this reason, promoting entry into force remains a top priority. We join the call on all preceding speakers to all the remaining Annex II countries to take every step possible towards early ratification. At the same time, we call on all states, and particularly ratifiers, to avoid creating any impression that nuclear testing could be resumed. At the time when Russia is blatantly violating international law through its unprovoked aggression against Ukraine, it must not further undermine the disarmament and non-proliferation regime by threatening the test or use of nuclear weapons. We also express our deep concern about the possibility of a new nuclear test by the DPRK. This would be a clear violation of Security Council's resolution and a further provocation detriment to international peace and security. Co-presidents, in the absence of entry into force, the international community has managed to build a strong and effective regime, a regime that has proven useful for verification, but also for civil and scientific uses. Pending entry into force, we must ensure that the verification system functions effectively and remains up to date. This requires adequate funding for sustaining of monitoring stations. Co-presidents, to conclude, Denmark would like to thank all the states for the dedicated efforts to reach consensus on today's final declaration. We hope it will provide a strong impetus for the entry into force of the treaty. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark to the United Nations for that statement. I now give the floor to Mr. Andres Piedra, representing Ecuador. You have the floor, sir. Co-presidents, distinguished colleagues, I congratulate Norway and Panama on their appointment to facilitate the process to itself facilitate the entry into force of the CTBT in accordance with Article 14. I also commend the Executive Secretary of the PrepCom of the CTPTO, Dr. Robert Floyd. I appreciate his efforts in order to bring about the universalization of the treaty and its entry into force. Since the last Article 14 conference held in 2021, significant progress has been made in promoting the treaty. Ratifications of the treaty by Dominica, Equatorial Guinea, the Gambia, Sao Tome and Principe, the Solomon Islands, Sri Lanka, Timor-Leste and Tuvalu, as well as the signing of it by Somalia early this month, deserve our recognition. My delegation reaffirms the importance of the CTBT. Consequently, we reiterate the need to ensure its timely entry into force. I urge those countries that do not yet accede to that instrument, particularly Annex II states, to do so as soon as possible. Ecuador is staunchly committed to nuclear disarmament and the non-proliferation regime. The CTBT is a fundamental part of that regime. In light of the above, I also reaffirm Ecuador's support for the strengthening of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Moreover, I echo previous speakers in appealing for the signature and ratification of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. The second meeting of the states parties of that treaty will occur in November 2023. In accordance with its commitment to the CTBT, Ecuador will continue to host on the Galapagos Islands infrasound and radionuclide stations in order to strengthen the international monitoring system. For Ecuador, there are no good hands in which nuclear weapons can fall. All nuclear weapons are reprehensible, particularly given that in 2022 expenditure on such weapons exceeded $82 billion. We are all well aware of the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of the use of nuclear weapons. As such, we are deeply concerned at the growing risk of their use that's been exacerbated by rhetoric which includes threat of their use, and statements regarding the modernization and expansion of nuclear arsenals. In face of that rhetoric, there must be an urgent and concerted response provided by the international community. To conclude, I insist upon the need for all states to refrain from conducting tests with the purpose of developing nuclear weapons. And I say that with the staunch conviction that any type of nuclear tests constitutes a serious threat to international peace and security. Thank you. I thank the distinguished representative of Ecuador for that statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Uruguay, Mr. Matias Andres Eustatiu. You have the floor, sir. Thank you, Mr. President. We wish to convey to you our wish that this conference will be a success. You have Uruguay's support to discharge your mandate. I wish to acknowledge the election of Panama, a state in our region, to the co-presidency. I also hail Norway, and we wish both co-presidents every success in their work. We welcome the fact that we have seen the adoption by consensus of the final declaration of the Article 14 conference. That is additional momentum to disarmament, non-proliferation, and international security. An additional impetus that we must recognize. We are all well aware of the harmful effects of nuclear explosions of all types, nuclear tests, or of those non-explosive nuclear tests which are designed to develop or improve the armaments of a given country. We state unequivocally that such actions imperil international peace and security, and as such, we demand that such actions cease entirely. Let us recall that these actions run counter to the object and purpose of the non-proliferation and nuclear disarmament regime, and they run counter to the obligations and provisions contained in the NPT, and run counter to the spirit and content of the CTBT. Mr. President, Uruguay wishes to underscore the importance of the fact that 187 states have signed and 178 have ratified the CTBT. With that in mind, we welcome the fact that Latin America and the Caribbean is a region in which all states have signed and ratified that instrument. That bolsters the region's commitment to nuclear disarmament and to the international non-proliferation regime. We also wish to underscore the joint declaration made by St. Vincent and the Grenadines on behalf of states parties in ECLAC as we commemorate the International Day Against Nuclear Test on the 29th of August. At that time, the region expressed its firm stance against those tests. I urge states that have not yet signed or ratified that important treaty to do so. Uruguay reiterates the importance and urgent need for them to sign and ratify that treaty without delay. Nuclear weapons must not be used by any country in any circumstances, and their use or threat of use constitutes a crime against humanity and a clear violation of international law. States must respect and absolutely fulfill commitments made under international law. Mr. President, finally, we wish to express our gratitude for the Executive Secretary's visit to Uruguay. That visit by Dr. Floyd gave us one more opportunity to bolster cooperation between the organization and our country, and we reiterated the importance of non-proliferation and the monitoring of nuclear tests, systems that are so important to guarantee global peace. Thank you.
Agradezco.
I thank the distinguished representative of Uruguay for that statement. I now invite the distinguished representative of Iraq to take the floor.
Safa. Tiene usted la palabra.
السادة الحضور الكرام في البداية
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I wish first of all to congratulate Norway and Panama on their co-presidency of this 13th conference to facilitate the entry into force of the CTBT. I wish them every success as they discharge their mandate. This conference is being held at a time when the security situation is a complex one throughout the world. We're witnessing growing tensions and acute disagreements. Nevertheless, it remains true that the success of the conference will reflect the international community's pursuit of its sustained efforts to expedite the entry into force of the CTBT. That was opened for signature more than 2.5 decades ago. Consequently, we must pool our efforts and demonstrate the flexibility necessary while at the same time ratcheting up our efforts to see the treaty enter into force and to achieve the universalization of it so that once and for all we can rid ourselves of nuclear weapons. This is important given the devastating risk they pose both to man and the environment. We must do all of the above to achieve a world which exists in peace, stability, and to achieve a world free of nuclear weapons. I can but thank Italy and South Africa too for their efforts during their co-presidency of the 12th conference. Co-presidents, the government of Iraq attaches the utmost importance to this conference. We have striven to actively participate at the highest level in this conference. We've done so since our accession to the CTBT in 2013. We've done all of the above because we believe in the importance of the treaty. That treaty is considered to be a fundamental instrument and a fundamental legal instrument, a fundamental legally binding instrument able to promote the disarmament and non-proliferation regime. It is fundamental in supporting international efforts to promote the universalization of relevant treaties and conventions in the field of disarmament, including the CTBT itself. In this regard, my delegation welcomes the ratification of the treaty by Dominica, Timor-Leste, Tuvalu, Equatorial Guinea, the Gambia, Sao Tome and Principe, the Solomon Islands, and Sri Lanka of the treaty since 2021. We here express the hope that that will encourage progress towards the entry into force of the treaty. Iraq also welcomes the signing by one Arab nation, Somalia, of the treaty that occurred on the 8th of September 2023. That act will serve to promote efforts designed to ensure the universalization of the treaty, and that act is a positive step towards the creation of a region free of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East. Iraq calls upon all states to continue to observe the voluntary moratoria on nuclear tests, given that those tests constitute a flagrant violation of the relevant resolutions of the Security Council and constitute a threat to regional and international peace and security. These moratoria should be respected given the negative impacts of these weapons and tests at all levels. 27 years have elapsed without the CTBT entering into force, and that is a source of concern. And this is in spite of the fact that it grows in importance as a treaty given the worsening of international tensions and given the back and forth of accusations regarding the reuse of nuclear weapons. Consequently, it's vital to act without delay to ensure the entry into force of the treaty through its ratification on the part of other countries in Annex 2 who've not yet done so. That ratification will put an end to the danger stemming from nuclear tests. Iraq reiterates the fact that the entry into force of the CTBT will give it legally binding power. It will strengthen both ethical and political responsibilities. At the same time, the entry into force of the treaty will strengthen the non-proliferation architecture and will further efforts to create zones free of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction, including in the Middle East. In this regard, the government of Iraq fully supports the UN resolutions and the resolutions of the Council, the Security Council, namely Resolution 2310 of 2016. That resolution reaffirms the vital importance and the imperative nature of the entry into force of the CTBT. To conclude, Iraq once again warns against the security threats and challenges posed to the international community as a result of the fact that certain terrorist groups could acquire nuclear technology and the materials necessary for the production of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction. We consequently emphasize the importance of attaching importance to strengthen security measures in the nuclear field. That's important because those measures are the means we have to stop such nuclear material falling in the hands of terrorists. Thank you.
Doy las gracias.
I thank the distinguished representative of Iraq for that statement. I now give the floor to Mr. Jesuino Alves, representing Timor-Leste.
Distinguished co-presidents, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Timor-Leste is proud to be one of the recent states to ratify the treaty, and we are pleased to be part of today's conference. I wish to take this opportunity to congratulate other new ratifying states, such as Sri Lanka and Somalia, who have taken this important step in the promotion of the international peace and security. Timor-Leste views the ratification of the treaty as a means in strengthening the international norms against nuclear testing. As a developing state, Timor-Leste places great value on the civil and scientific benefits provided by the CTBT. As a small island state, vulnerable to natural disaster, Timor-Leste may benefit from tsunami warnings based on the data produced by IMS stations in the region, and for that, we look forward to the assistance and cooperation with the CTBT on the matter. The provision of nuclear testing itself is fundamentally critical to our security environment, as it prevents humanitarian and environmental damage caused by the nuclear explosions. The treaty, in our view, is complementary to other disarmament frameworks, such as the Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, as it has successfully established a unique system to detect any nuclear test and explosion around the globe and to the achievement of nuclear arms proliferation. The CTBT has thus served as a critical framework to nuclear disarmament process, therefore contributing to our shared goal of a world without nuclear weapons, a goal we all strive to achieve. In this regard, Timor-Leste encourages states who have not done so to sign and ratify the treaty, not only to ensure its entry into force, but also to show our commitment to the global community, to the international peace and security. The need to progress with the entry into force of the CTBT is even more important now, given the current international tension. This requires all states to work towards the reinforcement of the treaty, as we believe that the universalization of the treaty will promote a lasting and verifiable nuclear disarmament and nuclear proliferation. Thank you.
Solicitamos un momento.
Please give us a moment.
Ya nuestra lista de oradores está.
Our speaker list is coming to its end.
Tengo una solicitud.
I have a request for the floor from the representative of Spain, but there's a point of order.
Tiene usted la palabra.
You have the floor.
A point of order. In accordance with the Rule 17th of the conference, I protest the Russian point on you speaking. I believe, like Denmark said, that we shall follow the established practice and allow groups to speak on behalf of countries. EU members already ratified CTBT. Thank you.
I would like to clarify the point of order of Spain. Solicitaría que me clarifique.
I would ask for clarification from you, sir, on that point of order.
Usted hace esa solicitud.
Are you making that request on the basis of any resolution, any decision in particular that's been made in the past? Is that what you're using as your basis for that point?
Sorry, based on established practice, we would like the European Union to speak. Thank you.
La delegación de la.
The delegation of the Russian Federation is asking for the floor. I give the floor to the Russian Federation.
I'm talking about Rule 41 and Rule 42 on the participation of specialized institutions, organizations, and intergovernmental organizations, as well as entities that have been granted observer status of the General Assembly of the UN. I'd like to note that the participation of these institutions and organizations in the conference does not give them the right to speak. That is in accordance with the rules. Practice only applies when there are no objections to that practice. If there are objections, then we must follow the written rules. Thank you.
I wish to thank the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation for that statement. And I wish to remind the conference that the practice of allowing the participation of representatives from the European Union as observers in the Article 14 conference was adopted through Resolution 265 of the 3rd of May 2011 of the General Assembly. That resolution states that in the sessions and during the work of the General Assembly and in international meetings and in conferences convened under the aegis of the United Nations General Assembly, this is paragraph 1, that paragraph of that resolution allows the European Union to put itself on the speakers list. That's a practice grounded in a resolution from the General Assembly. Consequently, I would appeal to delegations to allow the distinguished representative of the European Union in this case, as has been standard practice, to use the floor. Of course, I would invite the representative to stick to the title of Agenda Item 8 that's under consideration. That's a general exchange of opinions of states that have ratified and signed measures to ratifying and signatory states to, and they have to discuss measures to further the entry into force of the CTBT. Please stick to that agenda item and the confines thereof. Therefore, I am acting as president and implementing the aforementioned resolution, and as such, I give the floor to the representative of Spain to speak on behalf of the European Union. You have the floor, sir, as the distinguished representative of Spain.
The EU speaks on behalf of all the 27 member states which have all ratified the CTBT. Distinguished co-presidents, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states, the candidate countries Montenegro, Albania, Ukraine, the Republic of Moldova and Bosnia and Herzegovina, the potential candidate country Georgia, as well as Monaco and San Marino, aligned themselves with this statement. I thank the Secretary General for convening this conference and all distinguished high representatives of state signatories for their engagement and support. Let me start by congratulating Norway and Panama on assuming the presidency of its conference and express our appreciation to Italy and South Africa for their work as previous coordinators. Distinguished co-presidents, ladies and gentlemen, we have gathered here today at a challenging time. Russia's illegal war of aggression against Ukraine continues in blatant violation of the United Nations Charter. Global and regional tensions are on the rise and proliferation crises continue unabated. The European Union condemns in the strongest possible terms Russia's aggression against Ukraine and demands that Russia withdraw all its forces and military equipment from the entire territory of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. We express our concern over Russia's announcement on its readiness to conduct nuclear tests, which goes against the commitment it undertook by signing and ratifying the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. At times when multilateralism and multilateral institutions are under increasing pressure, we must redouble our efforts to uphold and strengthen them. The Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty is a key multilateral instrument to prevent the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. Nuclear weapon test explosions represent a serious threat to international peace and security and undermine the global non-proliferation regime. All state signatories are obliged to refrain from any such action pending the treaty's entry into force. Our goal is to be able to get rid of this last half sentence, pending the treaty's entry into force, as soon as possible. We need that obligation to become legally binding. The treaty's entry into force will outlaw nuclear weapon test explosions or any other nuclear explosions in a verifiable way, for good. Its international monitoring system has already demonstrated its value in providing independent and reliable data that will help deter non-compliance. Promoting it remains a top priority on the European Union. All 27 European Union member states have ratified the treaty, and we remain strongly committed to it. We call on all states, which have not yet done so, to sign and ratify the treaty without any preconditions or delay. Until then, we call on all states to refrain from conducting any action contrary to the treaty. In this context, we strongly condemn the nuclear tests carried out by the DPRK and call on all states to maintain moratoria on nuclear weapon tests, explosions, and other nuclear explosions. Since our last meeting, 8 more states have ratified the treaty, bringing us one step closer to its universalization. While the ultimate goal of the entry into force has not been achieved yet, the treaty has established itself as a strong, fully verifiable instrument, signed by 186 states and ratified by 178. We commend the Executive Secretary, Dr. Robert Floyd, and his team for this impressive record and fully support their efforts for achieving additional ratifications. The European Union will continue to be a strong supporter of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization. Since 2006, the European Union has provided voluntary contributions of more than 29.5 million euros for strengthening of its monitoring and verification capabilities. We call upon all states to honor their financial obligations and step up their political support to this organization. We will continue to use every opportunity to advocate the treaty prompt entry into force and universalization, because one thing is clear: it is only through multilateral solutions that we can best address global security threats and contribute to peace and security for all. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of the European Union of Spain. the distinguished representative of Spain on behalf of the European Union. I now would state that that statement brings us to the end of our list of speakers, and I would now, therefore, say that we've come to the end of our consideration of agenda item 8. And with that, I give the floor to my colleague Ambassador Eki to tackle agenda item 9.
Thank you. Item, one moment, please.
I've been informed that the Russian Federation is asking the floor in according to Rule 21, right of reply. You have the floor.
Thank you, Co-President. In light of the fact that there have been a number of accusations made against my country, unjust and unfounded accusations with no evidence, I am forced to take the floor under the right of reply. First of all, with regard to the accusation that Russia had declared its intention or willingness to conduct nuclear tests, these accusations are absolutely and obviously false, even to the person who made the accusations. They are based on selective quotes of the statements by the head of our state. Those statements have very clearly indicated that Russia could renew nuclear testing only in response to testing by other states. And that statement was extremely clear, saying that we would not be the first to renew nuclear testing. Now, why do we hear these accusations? Perhaps those who made them do not have any certainty themselves that a nuclear weapon state might not begin testing on their part. I also would like to express regret that a number of states, Italy, Bulgaria, Turkey, Germany, Austria, the UK, Canada, Denmark, and several others, that they are raising an issue in the conference that has no direct relation to the goals and aims of the treaty. One gets the impression that they, in doing so, are acting against the treaty and against the goal of its rapid entry into force. Why are they doing this? One should ask them that. And lastly, with deep regret, we must note the destructive role played by the European Union when it comes to issues of nuclear disarmament and arms control. Essentially, they are leveling accusations that have nothing to do with the goals and purposes of a number of conferences of treaties. And essentially, they are creating conflict where it could have been avoided. And this is especially unpleasant because the EU itself is not a party to these treaties and conferences and does not bear any obligations under them. Therefore, it does not have the right to issue any of these accusations. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation. There don't seem to be any further requests for the floor. As such, with that, we conclude our consideration of agenda item 8. And I give the floor to my colleague. the Ambassador of Norway in Vienna.
Thank you, Ambassador. In accordance with Rule 40 of the Rules of Procedure, the conference will now take up agenda item 9, namely statements by non-signatory states. The Secretariat has informed me that there are no requests for the floor from non-signatory states. So this concludes the consideration of item 9. So moving on, I would now like to take up agenda item 10 of the agenda, statements on behalf of non-governmental organizations. I now invite Ms. Emma Bjertén of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom to deliver the statement on behalf of the non-governmental organizations attending the conference. You have the floor, ma'am. Microphone for the league.
Okay, now? Thank you, co-presidents. This statement is coordinated by the Arms Control Association and endorsed by 87 representatives from civil society organizations and academia. The full list and a longer version of this statement is available online. Since the conclusion of the CTBT, nuclear testing has become taboo. Civil society friends of the CTBT welcome the governmental support for the CTBT that is evident at this assembly. But after 13 such meetings, it is clear to us that new and more energetic strategies must be considered not only to advance the treaty, but to strengthen the de facto norm against nuclear testing. Like other critical nuclear risk reduction, non-proliferation, and arms control agreements, the CTBT is under threat due to inattention and worsening relations between nuclear-armed adversaries. In recent years, the possessors of the largest nuclear arsenals have launched nuclear weapon modernization programs. Some are pursuing new nuclear weapons designs, and some are increasing the size and diversity of their arsenals. Military activities and subcritical experiments at former test sites continue. There has been no serious consideration of ratification of the CTBT by any of the remaining Annex II states in several years. With these challenges in mind, states parties cannot afford to simply express rhetorical support. They must do more through energetic, higher-level bilateral and multilateral diplomacy through this Article 14 process at the UN General Assembly, the Security Council, and beyond. They should focus their efforts on the 8 remaining Annex II holdout states: China, DPRK, Egypt, India, Iran, Israel, Pakistan, and the United States, which have deprived the international community and themselves of the full security benefits of the treaty and its extensive verification system. The Biden administration made it clear in 2021 that the United States supports the CTBT and is committed to work to achieve its entry into force. We welcome this, but unfortunately, the Biden administration has done nothing to pursue the kind of outreach and education campaign that will be necessary to secure the advice and consent for ratification by the US Senate. China's explanation for delaying formal consideration of its ratification of the treaty is no longer serious or credible. We call on China to finally initiate the process for ratification of the treaty without further delay or excuses. Unfortunately, there are credible reports that senior Russian officials have been discussing the option of unratifying the CTBT in order to achieve symmetry with the United States in all areas of nuclear policy, but no official decision has been made. We strongly urge Russia to formally reaffirm its full support for the CTBT. Given the military activities and subcritical experiments at former test sites continue, we urge all CTBT states parties, especially those with active nuclear test sites, to engage in talks to develop voluntary confidence-building measures to ensure that ongoing experiments at former nuclear test sites are consistent with the CTBT before and after the treaty's entry into force. The CTBT and the de facto global nuclear testing moratoria help reduce further health and environmental injury from further nuclear weapon testing. Hundreds of thousands of people have died, and millions more have suffered and continue to suffer from illnesses directly related to the radioactive fallout from nuclear detonations. CTBT states parties have a moral and, in some cases, a legal obligation to provide health monitoring, health care, and other forms of assistance to those impacted by nuclear weapons test explosions. We urge all CTBT parties to support further scientific research on the health and environmental effects of nuclear testing and provide financial support for health monitoring and healthcare programs for populations affected by nuclear testing, and cooperate with states parties to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, TPNW, as they begin to fulfill the legal responsibilities under the treaty to provide assistance and environmental remediation to those people and regions affected by nuclear weapons use and testing. We also encourage those CTBT state parties that have not already done so to sign and ratify the TPNW, which reinforces the CTBT's prohibition on nuclear testing. More than a quarter century since they were established, the CTBT and the CTBTO enjoy broad support and have been highly successful. But we cannot take the treaty, the international monitoring system, or the de facto global nuclear test moratorium for granted. Now is the time to act to reinforce the treaty and the global norm against nuclear testing, which is important for the achievement of nuclear disarmament. Thank you for your attention.
I would like to thank Ms. Bertén for her statement. This concludes the consideration of agenda item 10. We can now move to the adoption of the reports of the conference. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, let us now turn to agenda item 11, Report of Credentials Committee. Delegations will recall that the members of the Credentials Committee were appointed yesterday in accordance with the standard practice of the conference regarding procedural and organizational matters. The committee met earlier today and produced a report detailing its work in reviewing the credentials of delegations for this conference. I propose that the conference now consider the report of the Credentials Committee contained in document CTBT-ART.14/2023/CRP.1, which has been made available on the conference webpage and the ECS. I would like to invite the chairperson of the Credentials Committee to introduce the report of the committee. You have the floor. Where is the chair? There you are, Costa Rica. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, as the chairperson of the Credentials Committee, I am pleased to introduce the report of the Credentials Committee as contained in document CTBT-ART.14/2023/CRP.1, which has been made available on the CTBTO website. The committee met earlier today, on 22nd September 2023, and examined credentials of the representatives of the ratifying states of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty attending the conference. The committee adopted, without a vote, a resolution accepting the credentials of the states concerned. The committee recommends to the Conference on Facilitating the Entry into Force of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty the adoption of the following draft resolution as contained in the report of the committee. Credentials of representative to the Conference on Facilitating the Entry into Force of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty held in New York, United States of America on 22nd September 2023. The Conference on Facilitating the Entry into Force of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, having considered the report of the Credentials Committee and the recommendation contained therein, adopts the report of the Credentials Committee. Thank you, Madam Co-President.
We have now heard the presentation of the report of the Credentials Committee. Is there any delegation that wishes to take the floor on this agenda item? I see none. I would therefore like to propose that the conference adopts the report of the Credentials Committee as contained in document CTBT-ART.14/2023/CRP.1. May I take it that the conference wishes to adopt this report? I see no objection. It is so decided. On behalf of the Presidency, I wish to take this opportunity to congratulate the Credentials Committee and to thank the members of that committee for their work and the efficient and timely manner in which they accomplished their duties under the rules of procedure of the conference. So I will just give me a moment, please, for consultation with the Secretariat. Distinguished delegates, we are waiting for the availability of the report. So, and I also wanted to note that, as you know, in New York, interpretation is until 6 o'clock. So we will hopefully have the report available for you electronically as soon as possible. Dear delegates, thank you for your patience. And if we don't have the report very soon, thank you to the interpreters for being with us today. Delegates, the draft report is on the ECS now. I'll give you a couple of minutes to find it. It shouldn't be too complicated, the text there. Just give you a couple of minutes to find it. I hope the internet is working. Dear delegates, I've been informed that ECS is not commonly used here in New York, so we will have to wait for it to be on the web page. So apologies for this. So a couple of more minutes. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, dear distinguished delegates, thank you so much for your patience. The report is now up on the website. You can follow the proceedings live, so to speak. So we will now turn our attention to the second last item on our agenda, which is agenda item 12, adoption of the report of the conference. The draft report contained in conference room paper 2, CTBT article 14/2023/CRP.2 has been made available on the conference web page. May I draw your attention to paragraph 22? It should read and will be amended to, regarding the statements at the start, representatives of foreign ministries of Italy and South Africa. So it should be representatives of the foreign ministries. And in the header, the word draft will be removed from the header of annex. So when it's adopted, of course, it should no longer be a draft. So with these amendments, I propose that we now deal with the report on a section-by-section basis, starting with the introduction. May I take it that the conference wishes to adopt the section entitled Introduction? I see no objection. It is so decided. I turn to the section of the draft report on organizational and procedural decisions. May I take it that the conference wishes to adopt the section entitled Organizational and Procedural Decisions? I see no objection. It is so decided. Turning to the work of the conference, may I take it that the conference wishes to adopt a section entitled Work of the Conference? I see no objection. It is so decided. Turning to which? Yeah. I have a note here regarding the list of participants. We seem to have omitted Italy, so Italy should be added to the list of participants. Apologies for that. So turning to the section Work of the Conference, may I take it that the conference wishes to adopt the section entitled Work of the Conference? I see no objection. It's so decided. Turning to the section Conclusion of the Conference, may I take it that the conference wishes to adopt the section entitled Conclusion of the Conference? I see no objection. It is so decided. We will now consider the draft report of the conference as a whole, as contained in conference room paper 2, document CTB-article 14/2023/CRP.2. Once adopted, this working paper, as amended, will be reissued as an official document number 6, CTBT-article 14/2023/6, in all official languages of the conference. In accordance with the established practice, the report of the conference will contain, in its annex, the adopted final declaration and the measures agreed therein. May I take it that the conference wishes to adopt the report as a whole? I see no objection. It is so decided. Thank you very much. So, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, with the adoption of the report, we have now come to the final item on the agenda, the closure of the 2023 Conference on Facilitating the Entry into Force of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. In concluding this 13th such conference, and on behalf of Panama and Norway, who share the presidency of this conference, I wish to thank the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Mr. Antonio Manuel de Oliveira Guterres, for convening the conference and for extending all the necessary support to ensure its success. I would also like to pay tribute to the efficiency of the UN staff members who provided such excellent service and support both prior to and during the conference. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity to thank wholeheartedly the Executive Secretary of the CTBTO Preparatory Commission, Dr. Robert Floyd, as well as the staff of the Provisional Technical Secretariat of the CTBTO Preparatory Commission for organizing this conference, as well as for all their support to the presidency in preparing for and conducting the conference. Special thanks to Semra and her assistant Anna over there, who patiently followed the negotiations in Vienna before agreeing to the final declaration. I also wish to express the gratitude of the presidency for the support provided by the UN Conference Services and the interpreters who have left now, but who were very patient with us and stayed until the adoption of the report. So with these concluding remarks, I now declare the 13th conference of the Facilitating the Entry into Force of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty closed. I wish you all a lovely and well-deserved evening and weekend. Safe travels back.